I became horribly ill and nobody could figure out why. My wife had been on my case about going in and seeing the doctor, and I developed a really bad thrush infection in the back of my throat. She just put her foot down and let me know that I was going to the doctor, made the appointment, and took me in. Lab capability there was a small clinic in a rural agricultural area. Gave me some metformin and sent me home. I called back the next day and I said, I got my blood glucose meter and it's broken because all it says is high. And I didn't realize that blood glucose meters won't read anything over 600. She screamed for me to come right in, put me on insulin, and that was the beginning of my journey.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hopefully everyone's going to have a nice day. Happy Tuesday morning. We've got a guest today, Paul, who I just see has just popped in here. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? This is so strange. It's like, I know you. I see you every day. And it just kind of struck me as a little bit odd there for a second.
Yeah, it is kind of, it's kind of funny because I was in Costco yesterday and ran into two people that recognized me. It's just, same old thing. And it's just, I'm pretty much the same in person as I am here on this type of thing. But anyway, where are you located, Paul?
We just moved a couple of years ago to Oklahoma. Live just outside in the country, outside of Shawnee.
Very nice. Okay. Where did you move? Where did you move from?
California. The greatest place to move from.
A lot of people are having an exodus from there, it seems like, for various reasons. In fact, we left there
like
last year.
Just locked up.
Yeah. If you don't mind just kind of sharing your background with us a little bit.
At age 62, I'm now 66, but at age 62, I became horribly ill and nobody could figure out why. My background is pretty sedentary, computer-oriented work. I do parametric 3D modeling. I design equipment, but basically do it on a computer so that computers can cut the parts out and put them together. I love the work, not really strenuous. And I just started developing really, really strange problems. What I called insatiable thirst, urinating constantly, getting up 7, 8, 9 times a night, craving sweets, and losing weight.
Sounds like diabetes.
Type 1. Yeah, diabetes is kind of a horrible term because it has two different diseases within it. I mean, diabetes is the name of a symptom. It's not the name of a disease, or that's my opinion.
Well, there's definitely a pretty significant difference between type 1, which used to be called juvenile onset, and type 2, adult onset. And there's actually even some subcategories of that now there's actually some people claim there's even 4 or 5 types of different diabetes that are out there. But anyway, so you 62, you discover you're type 1 diabetic. How did you talked about some of the symptoms you have, but when did they say, hey, or how did they discover? Did you roll into the emergency room with a blood glucose of 500 or something, or what happened?
Oh no, I'm way too stubborn for that. My wife had been on my case about going in and seeing the doctor, and I developed a really bad thrush infection in the back of my throat. Mm-hmm. And when it just about closed off my airway, she just put her foot down and let me know that I was going to the doctor, made the appointment, and took me in. Luckily, the nurse practitioner that I saw is familiar with diabetes and the symptoms of high blood glucose, and she knows that fungal infections are very, very common. It's just glucose is fuel for them. Mm-hmm. And first thing she did was finger stick me. It was like 5 something. Mm-hmm. And this was in the morning before I'd eaten. So that's pretty high. So not having any lab capability there, was a small clinic in a rural agricultural area. Gave me some metformin and sent me home. I called back the next day and I said, I got my blood glucose meter and it's broken because all it says is high. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that blood glucose meters won't read anything over 600. So she screamed for me to come right in, put me on insulin, and that was the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, that's got to be a shock. But, like I said, this is how, and it's interesting because in their 60s presenting with type 1 diabetes, this is for some reason, this is becoming more and more common than it used to be. That, type 2 is very common, but even type 1s are happening, later and later in life and at different stages. So it's kind of a unique
Well,
thing.
I would question that conclusion. I work in a couple of groups that support type 1 diabetics and help them and coach them. And we just recently did a survey in our adult LADA group. And over 60% of the people in that group were originally misdiagnosed as type 2s.
Yeah.
Some of them for many years. So when you look at, you say, wow, it's happening in adults more. No, they're finding out that it's happening in adults more. What you really need to ask is, what happened to those poor type 1s diagnosed as type 2 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I'm sure there is a percentage of mischaracterized diabetics, and we're discovering that, you mentioned a lot of the, the late onset, autoimmune diabetes of adulthood, but there is, and there's a certain percentage of type 2 but diabetics that burn out their pancreas to the degree where they stop making insulin, and they effectively also become type 1. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So you get this diagnosis, they put you on insulin, they send you to a diabetes educator or something like that and tell you to eat 50 grams of carb a meal, or how did that work? How did that?
No, I was sent to the ADA's website to download their diabetic self-care handbook for type 1s.
Okay. So
real personalized care.
And did you pursue that for a while?
Yeah, failed miserably.
What
incredibly horrible.
What was the advice they gave you, and what do you mean by you failed?
50 grams of carbs per day. Make sure you get so many healthy whole grain servings per day. What's a good food? What's a bad food? Obviously they don't want you drinking soda pop, but they don't have a problem at all with you drinking orange juice.
So you said 50 grams per meal or per day? I think it was per meal.
Per meal. Okay. Minimum. Yeah. Minimum. Many want you to eat more than that. And it poses particular, you've got this website, this wonderful intervention for people called Carnivore. Type 1s can't do what you say. Our dosage is based upon the amount of carbohydrates they make us eat. If we tried to go carnivore without being crazy like me or crazy like Ryan Attar and figuring out our own dosage, we couldn't possibly do it because we won't be instructed in how to titre our doses for the difference in carbohydrate and protein.
Yeah, I mean, maybe perhaps not through the ADA. I mean, there are other sites that there are other ways to figure out protein dosing and fat dosing and things like that, which is interesting. But let me ask you, so you're
Dr. Bernstein's a good one.
Right. Dr. Bernstein, his Diabetes Solution is an excellent resource for people that are suffering from either type 1 or type 2, quite honestly. So, I mean, they put you on insulin. What was the regimen? Was it basal bolus? I mean, how did they, long acting?
No, it was basically, I can't remember what they call it, but you check your blood sugar, and if your blood sugar is at this level, you use this much insulin before a meal, and if it's this level, you use this much insulin a meal, and then you start out on so much basal insulin and increase it or decrease it according to whatever your fasting insulin is. Not a very good way of managing it, even if you were on a high carb diet. You really need to tailor the insulin that you take to the food that you eat.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuance to that, and it's without going into the details and like there's a lot more to it than just titrate this based on your fasting insulin, and I think there's a lot more things going on there. But with the high carb diet, eating at least 50 grams per meal and potentially much more than that is what often the ADA is recommending. What kind of control did you have? Did you see your numbers going up and down pretty high? And what kind of A1Cs were you ending up with?
We call that the roller coaster, where you have very high glucose. So you take a correction dose of insulin and you go down too low. And then you take a correction of the 15 grams of carb that they suggest, which is ridiculous, by the way. I don't take any more than 2 to 4 grams of carbs now to modify my blood sugar. So you're constantly screaming down hypoglycemic, screaming up hyperglycemic many times during the day.
And how does that feel? Just for those
Oh,
that
it
haven't
feels horrible.
What do you mean by horrible? What are you feeling when it's happening?
I couldn't work. I'm now, I call it retired. I'm actually disabled. What I do is it's intellectually challenging and highly technical. And the brain fog, inability to think straight, short-term memory loss, emotional outbursts. They don't, and underlying it all was a very fatalistic attitude that I had, not realizing that it was the food I was eating that was causing that. I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
I literally didn't care. It just surprised me so much when I did get straightened out and that lifted. I had no idea how badly I was being affected until it was gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's something. I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of people don't realize, diabetes has a lot of effects on people, and there is a huge significant mental issue. And the fact that your blood glucose is going up and down so dramatically, and you're hypoglycemic, and you're sweating, and you're starving, and you can't think straight, and you feel like you're drunk, and then it goes up, and then you start falling asleep, and it's just this constant sort of battle of just never feeling kind of normal. There's a brief period where you might feel normal, where your blood glucose is in a relatively normal range. How did you get out of this? Where did you decide to do this low carb carnivore? Where did that come in? How did you discover that?
I was irritated with my wife when she made me go to the doctor. So when they came in to check my blood sugar, I told them they couldn't check mine until they checked hers. And hers was 325. She was a serious type 2 diabetic.
Wow.
I started studying, basically I thought I had my side all figured out. I started trying to figure out how can we get her better, because everything I heard about through the official channels was type 2 diabetes is progressive and chronic. All they can do is slow it down. They can't stop it. And that just wasn't good enough for me. It's never good enough for a loved one. You don't listen to anybody who says stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting into Ben Bickman, Paul Mason, David Diamond. And boy, you talk about an eye opener. This different viewpoint, this different take on nutrition and health that nobody even knows is out there. It's the best kept secret on earth, isn't it?
Well, we're trying, believe me.
No, I know you are.
We're trying to get it out there, but there's a lot of censorship and a lot of people that don't want that information out there, it seems like. So you started researching because your wife is now discovered to be type 2 diabetic. Now, I mean, one might say, well, maybe it's contagious. It's a virus and it's contagious. Or maybe you both had the same food environment. What was your diet like? Let's just back up. What was your diet like prior to all this discovery? Were you just eating the standard American garbage, or what were you doing?
Oh, yeah. I was standard American diet. I believe that everything in balance, which means whatever crap I wanted to eat during the day. That was my excuse, right? I've been involved in statistics enough to know that coincidences do happen. You get so many instances of different things happening, and two of them are going to happen at the same time. It's called the birthday paradox, and it's not as rare as you would think it is. Where type 1s are 1 in 300, and type 2s are, probably the majority of the country right now.
Yeah, so maybe 95%, yeah.
And the chances of having 2 in a household are pretty darn good.
So you start reading about and learning about, Bickman, some of my stuff, Paul Mason, David Diamond, and some of these other folks that are out there professing maybe a different nutritional strategy away from maybe the high carb, consistent carbohydrate diet that the diabetic ADA often recommends. So when did you decide I'm going to try this stuff, and then how did it go?
What got me was I found R.D. Dykman, his son, is a type 1 diabetic diagnosed at age 9, right. And he talked about what he went through. And having a similar technical background, what he said just made sense. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what kind of grip you have on mathematics. This is chaotic behavior. And if you can't treat the root cause of the chaos, you're never going to fix this. And then he followed him to Dr. Bernstein, the law of small numbers, the idea that you need to get your body into a much calmer, much more predictable, much more reliable state to be able to use the tools that we have, the insulin and the blood glucose monitors.
Yeah. So
that's all the difference.
So with the law of small numbers, I guess the idea is, if you keep your insulin fairly stable, rather than these huge, perturbations where you're having to chase it with very large doses of insulin, which physiologically don't necessarily match with the absorption characteristics of the insulin, with particularly the rapid acting, and you end up with these overcorrections and undercorrections and constant battling. And so when you're just making a small nudge, there's a guy, I think Steve Posner, he talks about sugar surfing, and he's written a book on something similar where he
I'm not real fond of that.
He has, he's still more of the ADA, type of diet, but at the same time, it's making these gentle corrections. But, Bernstein has helped a huge number of type 1s. And for guys who don't know Richard Bernstein, I think he's 86 or something like that, maybe 87 years old. He's been living with type 1 diabetes since he was a kid. And
11.
Still doing well. So, okay, so you get into this, start reading Dykman stuff and Bernstein stuff. How does it go once you start implementing? And I guess Carnivore comes in here at some point, I guess.
Well, it convinced me intellectually. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to do a test. And if it's going to be a good experiment, I'm going to follow it precisely. And I did that. And I was probably at a A1C up around 14, 15 at diagnosis. Mm-hmm. My first post-diagnosis A1C was 4.9. See, that's the thing that people don't understand about type 1 right away, is it isn't just being able to cover the food. Anybody can cover the food on any given day. Is it going to be the same tomorrow? No. Is it going to be the same an hour from now? No, because what we're doing is we're predicting the future. We're trying to dose for what our body will be an hour and a half from now when the insulin kicks in. What this does is you get down below this threshold where I think it has a lot to do with being metabolically flexible. It has a lot to do with being in ketosis or in a stable metabolic state where your body's not switching back and forth from burning rocket fuel to burning crude oil constantly, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You get out of that routine and everything settles down to where the tools work very well.
You said your first post-diagnosis A1C was 4.9. So was that on carbohydrates, or was that already on a low carb diet?
No, I only tried the carbohydrates for about 3 weeks.
Okay. So you quickly decided that wasn't going to work for you.
Yeah. So I searched for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
So I actually got on the proper train fairly quickly.
Okay. Good for you. And so how does that look like for you now? I mean, as far as how much are you dosing? What does your day look like typically for your diabetic routine?
That's pretty easy. Actually, I get up and I take my long-acting insulin. It's split 2 times a day. Mm-hmm. Take it in the morning and in the evening. It's not equal because your needs for insulin aren't the same when you're sleeping as when you're awake. And about 10, 11, I have my morning meal. I eat twice a day. Mm-hmm. And that's more because of another comorbidity that I have, or other disease that I have that's probably related, which is EPI, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. I don't make digestive enzymes anymore. So I have to take a whole handful of basically, it's not a supplement. It's
lipases and amylases and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's industrial dose, where what you would find as a supplement would be about 1,500 to 4,000 units. And what I'm taking is 125,000 units per meal. Wow. So it's a handful of pills.
Yeah, so you've got a pancreas that doesn't do much. I mean, maybe it puts out some glucagon, perhaps. I don't know. But so, your basal, for number-wise, how much basal are you utilizing, just out of curiosity?
Morning, it's only 5.5 units. Mm-hmm. My meal coverage in the morning, you're normally more carbohydrate sensitive in the morning, or more insulin excuse me, you usually need more insulin in the morning.
Mm.
I don't know whether it's because you're waking up, a cortisol response
Right.
or whatever,
Right.
but I take about 4.5 units of basal insulin, bolus insulin for the meals that I have. I make sure the meals are the same amount, the same size. I don't really vary the dose.
And is that a regular insulin or is that a Humalog or what do you? I know Bernstein's a fan of a regular.
Oh, I'm a major fan of regular.
Yeah.
I don't think you could follow a meat only diet or a substantially meat only diet without having regular, because Humalog and Novolog have both been modified to act on the same time frame as carbohydrate digestion.
Right.
Which is much, much faster than protein.
Yeah.
Not only that, when you're dosing for protein, you're not really covering any glucose rise from the food you're eating. You're seeing what's called a glycogen release, glycogenolysis, because your body knows that it's going to need insulin to mobilize protein into your cells. So your body releases glucagon, which makes your body release blood sugar. I'm getting too complicated. But basically, it's not because your steak's turning to cake. Okay, that doesn't happen. It's you need protein. You need insulin for protein. Simple answer.
Yeah, that's I mean, think what you see is the protein you're absorbing has an impact on glucagon secretion, which is causing glycogenolysis.
Exactly.
Which then causes a rise in blood glucose and has to be countered by insulin. So you're covering that, right? And that's interesting. And the interesting thing about, if you look at the onset of duration and onset of action of regular insulin, the onset, maybe in an hour and it lasts, maybe peaks at about 3 hours and lasts for about 6 hours. That pretty much covers the protein digestion absorption spectrum pretty nicely. So that's an interesting thing for that. How much? Yeah,
if you're going to try and cover that with Humalog, you'd have to inject twice.
Right. Yeah. Because your peak would be on
at the beginning of the meal. Right. Yep.
Yeah. What do you find? So how big are your meals? Just out of curiosity, how much are you eating?
Really big, but a lot of it has to do with poor absorption. I don't digest food real well.
I see.
And don't even get into the symptomology of EPI. It's hideous. But with the enzyme pills, I'm doing pretty good. But I don't think I'm absorbing anywhere near what I should be eating. I tracked it for a while, and I was eating about 5,000 calories a day.
Wow.
And I'm 6'2", and at diagnosis, I went all the way down to 118 pounds. I managed to gain back. I'm back up to 160.
Yeah.
But still, for somebody 6'2", that's pretty thin.
118, yeah, that is very thin. That is
concentration camp.
Right. That's what type 1 diabetes did, and people would waste away, and because their body would just kind of auto digest itself. There's kind of Marty Kendall who thinks that, there's a certain amount of basal we have to dose to keep ourselves from turning into a pool of glucose as we break down our own proteins. And so
I lost a lot of skin.
Yeah. Does that recover? And how long have you been on? So you said it was 4 years ago this all occurred. So you've been carnivore.
Almost 5.
Nearly 5. You've been doing have you been on a fully carnivorous diet for that long or mostly carnivorous?
No, I'm an accidental carnivore.
Okay.
I didn't start doing this because I saw any type of nutritional superiority, but I've never believed that there was a reason why you have to eat plants. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, plant is just variety. And after a while, it became such a pain in the butt, I just stopped eating the darn things.
And how is that? I assume the negative effects it hasn't had any negative effects on your diabetes, has it?
None whatsoever. Compared to other well-controlled diabetics, I'm probably right up at the top of the list. I'm lucky. I'm very consistent.
And your hemoglobin A1C, you mentioned the first one was 4.9. What does it typically run over the years that you've been doing this now?
Well, 4.9 to 5.1, which is basically in the variation of the test.
Yeah. So basically, completely normal A1C.
Well, I can hit any number you want me to.
Right.
I don't really see a lot of value in hitting 4.5, but I could do that.
Yeah.
And I could do it without risk.
Yeah.
Because it isn't the low glucose that gets you, it's the excursions.
Well, yeah, that's what Bernstein talks, because, a classic endocrinologist will warn you against hypoglycemia because there's relations to dementia down the road. And Bernstein will argue it's because of the rapid fluctuations. And most people that have hypos are type 1s that are overcorrecting for, or type 1s and type 2s overcorrecting for carbs. And that's sort of the issue there.
And it's a moot point because I don't have hypoglycemia at a frequency any worse than any other type 1 diabetic. Yeah. It is a non-issue. It's an argument that they bring up because they don't want to change their guidance.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, I know there's some people say, well, we've had people that have had hypoglycemia comas and we don't want to get sued about that. And so I know there's kind of a CYA part of that. But at the end of the day, if you look at the ADA's current guidelines, their target range is between 70 and 180, 70% of the time. So, some people would argue sitting around at 180 all day long is not a good thing. And that, and only doing that 70% of the time, you could be even higher potentially is not
I'm
particularly
70 to 120,
right.
Probably 95% of the day.
Right. Do you, with diabetes comes the concerns about retinopathy, nephropathy, cardiovascular disease. Is that something you're monitoring or maintaining? Usually diabetics are, checking these things, periodically. Have you noticed any change with that stuff?
It's an emotional issue for me because I coach type 1s who have had horrible things happen to them. Mm-hmm. You forgot gastroparesis.
No, I didn't mean it, but gasparesis, no.
Talk about horrible.
Right.
I had my eyes checked, and they did check and find that there was damage. Mm-hmm. I don't know the medical name for it. Mm-hmm. And I do know that I went back in 1 year later, and I said, I'm interested to see if any of this is resolved. And the doctor said, no, this doesn't resolve.
Right.
And then he did the pictures, and he had them up on the screen, and he's flipping back and forth between the two, saying, all kinds of strange noises. And he turns and tells me, oh, yeah, it looks fine.
Yeah, it's resolved. Yeah, it's funny, I think this is a really important point. I want to just talk about this because you're not the first diabetic, and certainly not the first type 1 diabetic that I've run into that has done a low carb or even a carnivore diet, and they have had their diabetic retinopathy go away. And to me,
or at least improve
or go away or whatever, and to me, that is very, very powerful because the people will say that, well, low carb diets are just masking the disease is still there. To me, then if that were the case, the retinopathy would not improve. These things would continue to progress. It would get worse. But what I'm seeing is actual recovery of end organ damage, which is the whole reason we don't want diabetes in the first place. It's not because blood sugar is high. It's because our kidneys fail. We get heart attacks. We go blind. We cut our feet off. So that is really what we're trying to avoid there. And
supporting your point, it's not just retinopathy. I had peripheral neuropathy. Mm-hmm. It's gone.
Yeah, completely
resolved.
Yeah,
in this arm, in my right arm, and both feet. Gone.
And did you?
That's no fun when the nerves start coming back. By the way,
when you had the retinopathy, was that how long was that? Did you have that prior to the diagnosis of the official diagnosis of diabetes?
Yes, it's part of what made me end up going into the doctor's office. My son, I worked with my son at the time, mm-hmm. and we went outside of the parking lot to talk. And I was talking, this was in Central Valley of California, and I just said, the fires are really, really bad. I can barely see down to the end of the street. And he just had this shocked look on his face. He says, Dad, there's no smoke in the air. And it's much easier to see something in another person than to see it in yourself.
Right.
Because you compensate. You constantly compensate. If somebody tells you, look, dude, you need help. You're in trouble. Please listen to them. Don't argue with them. Don't try and explain to them while they're wrong. Just go get it checked out.
Yeah. I think good advice there. And you mentioned, but you were talking about neuropathy, like you couldn't feel your hands. How long did that precede your official diagnosis of diabetes? Or do you think, did you have it for a few years, or was it something new?
Yeah, it creeps up on you. It started on the sides of my big toes.
Okay.
And then it started creeping up to the top of my 4 feet, and then both feet.
Yeah.
And then, and then you get the tingly numbs instead of just the lack of sensation. And then when the patch on my arm was the last one that developed, which was actually I think probably the gravest nerve damage, because I completely lost all feeling in that patch of skin between my elbow and my hand. It just sneaks up on you. It's hard to tell how long it presaged it, but it did.
Yeah.
I was probably in trouble for a good 2 or 3 years before diagnosis.
And then, like I said, probably during this whole time, your pancreas is slowly shutting down while this is going on. Any thoughts as to why because it's interesting, the type 1 diabetics, there's a lot of theories as to why that occurs. Some people think it's an infectious etiology, some kind of environmental damage, some people's genetics, but of course it's 60, you're probably like, well, seems like late for that. Any idea why you think you contracted type 1? Is there any thoughts on that? Were you have an infection at some point, or what was the thought on that?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I do know that teenage years I had viral hepatitis, not Hep C, the other one. I can't remember what it is.
Hepatitis A, perhaps. Yeah.
And other than that, really not a lot of problems with infectious diseases. I didn't really have a history of autoimmune issues, asthma, none of that. I hear people online all the time and say, oh yeah, COVID gave me type 1, or this gave me type 1. And they don't realize that whatever happened to you years before you ever see the symptoms. So that trying to make these cause and effect connections is really hard to do when you have a year to 2 years between observable effect and onset of difficulty. So the honest answer is, I really don't know. I really don't know. I was never a type 2 diabetic. Always thin, always, whatever the stereotypical non-type 2 was, that was me. I could sit down and polish off an extra large pizza and then turn around, go get another one, and never gain a pound for the longest portion of my life.
Well, certainly. Well, let me ask you, are you still being followed by some sort? Is an endocrinologist following you, or is it a primary care physician, or who's sort of managing, prescribing your insulin, that type of stuff?
Person who I liked retired, and I just don't feel like breaking in a new one. These people know nothing about managing my disease. Right. They may be able to interpret blood markers or tests or these things or that things, but when it comes to what's important for a person's quality of life, they know nothing.
Regardless, you still have to have a physician that prescribes you insulin, I assume, right?
No, I buy my insulin over the counter at Walmart.
Oh, okay. So, what are you using for long acting then?
NPH.
Oh, NPH. Okay, got it.
I figured out how to make it work well.
Okay.
It's not as bad as people make it sound.
Yeah.
It got a really bad rap back before the old low carb days.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're eating low carb, it's not hard to manage. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. Well, that's something that people don't know or maybe don't know that you can buy insulin over the counter at Walmart fairly inexpensively. I think it's like $25 for a vial of regular, and I don't know what they charge for NPH, but same. So that's, as opposed to, if you don't have insurance, you may be paying $500 a month or more for some of this other stuff. And so
more is more common. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting situation there that you're managing your own. So, do you check your own, do you ever want a CGM or anything like that?
No, I don't have a CGM. Yeah. I use just a glucometer. I do spring for the best one. I've got the Bear, the Contour Next, which has got the new test stripped technology. It's got very good accuracy.
And then how often are you checking those glucoses then?
I can usually tell how well I'm doing. I'll cruise through a day, sometimes only testing 6 or 8 times. But if I get any questions pop up, I'll test 12 to 18 times a day.
Okay, that's a lot of that's a lot of finger sticks. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, 18 times a day is a lot. I mean, and it's for people that haven't lived with diabetes, that's a it's a lot of thinking about that all the time. Diane's asking about the syringes over the counter. Yes, Walmart will sell you the syringes as well. So,
yes,
it's
it's really not that many finger sticks, because you cannot manage type 1 diabetes with a CGM. And I'll defend that statement. The inherent accuracy and the repeatability and the trustworthiness of a CGM just isn't there when you're injecting a little too much of something that might be fatal.
Some people will utilize it as a tool to tell them when to check, when to do an actual finger stick to make a decision, so they actually kind of get a sense of it.
It's useful for the alarms. If somebody gave me one free, I'd use it. I don't see a value in it other than training and information and spotting patterns and improving my coverage. Yeah, I'd take it if it was free, but I'm not going to spend money on one. It's really good. Okay, here's a sexist statement. You ready? They're much better for women.
CGMs.
Us guys have got it easy.
CGMs are better for women, you say?
Yes, us guys have it easy.
In what regard?
Everything affects your blood glucose, hormones, emotions, exercise, everything you can think of. I know a lady who's, because she was diagnosed at 3, had horrible complications. She's now 30 and recovering from a lot of the complications. She's really, really tight with her glucose. And she's got 3 different basal regimes, depending on what time of the month it is. 3 distinctly different basal regimes. So that's what I mean by us guys have got it easy. We're just, eat steak and watch TV. Pretty much it.
Well, some of us like to exercise as well. I mean, it's it's one of those things that it's interesting.
I do too, but exercise for me is making it end to end at Walmart.
Got it. Yeah.
I've lost a lot of muscle mass. I've lost a lot of stamina. I'm building back. I've got my weights out in the garage, but at 62, it's really hard putting back what you lost.
Well, let me back up a little bit, because you mentioned your wife, type 2 diabetic. How is she also adopted this low carb carnivore approach, or how is she doing?
She has now. She has a lot more. It's harder for type 2s than type 1s. Type 1s, they put a gun to your head. Behave or die. Type 2, they think they can put it off. They think they can cheat. And they don't recognize the siren call of the carb addiction. They never have to challenge it directly and get rid of it, because it's going to kill them. It's really harder being a type 2 than being a type 1. So she had a wake-up call just recently. She had to go and see someone like you for shoulder reconstruction for rotator cuff on-the-job injury. And they canceled her surgery on her because her blood sugar was too high.
Okay.
So that got her attention, and she's doing much, much better now. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned that it's harder for type 2s, but type 2s, if they go on the right diet, they can get off. They don't need to be on medication. They can, whereas a type 1 is going to be stuck taking insulin regardless for the most part.
There is no remission for type 1.
Yeah.
You could make it very manageable, and you can have a really, really good life. And I wish I could convince all of the type 1s out there that just think that it's such unmitigating hell, that it really doesn't have to be that way. But type 2, you can get over it. Yeah. I don't think you could ever eat lots of carbs again in the rest of your life, but you can get back to normal.
Yeah. And I guess you said you interact with some groups, some type 1 groups. Are you getting some people that are adopting what you're doing? I mean, I know there's type 1
Oh,
diabetics
yeah.
out there that are on board, but you're having a lot of resistance from other ones.
There are thousands of us out there doing this. I mean, you talk about best kept secrets. Gosh, it's like, hey, guess what? There's thousands of people maintaining blood glucose, type 1s, maintaining blood glucose at under 5.5. Mm-hmm. Thousands of us. Yes, the adult group, the latter group is more difficult. I work with a children group. They're wonderful. They're saints. They're my heroes. These mothers and fathers are just wonderful people, because a parent is always going to take much better care of their child's health than an adult's going to take of their own health. Yeah. The adults, they're a little difficult from time to time to deal with. Sometimes you have to apply the clue stick. It's hard.
I haven't heard that term, the clue stick. What is that? You get a clue? What is that?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, you tap them on the head with it to try and bestow a clue. So it's a Southernism.
Yeah. Do you, outside of, controlling your blood glucose and having basically normal A1Cs, and, I guess arguably a better quality of life with that, have you noticed any other benefits from going carnivore or low carb as far as other health things?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What were those?
It's astounding. Like I said, I did not understand that I had emotional issues before this happened. I didn't even know I had it. It's gone. I'm a happy person. I'm a well-adjusted person. Okay, honestly, I get really, really angry when I hear misinformation about diabetes. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Personal failing. I'll admit to it. But I can really, really get irritated with it. But other than that, I'm healthier than I've been in the last 20 years. So in that respect, I'm not sure that if I didn't have type 1 diabetes, I think it's probably 50-50 that I'd be alive today when I look at the family history of my family.
Yeah.
My younger brother died at 49, widowmaker. My mom, same way. Grandfather, same way. Come to find out, everybody talks about cholesterol, and by far the biggest risk factors, hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia. Why don't they tell people that?
Some people, there's some people are telling them that, but you see that, and there was I just pulled a paper. There was just a paper that just came out looking at. It was interesting. It came out on statin usage, the outcomes for major adverse cardiovascular events, heart attack, stroke, death, or revascularization, and they found that if you have a diabetic who has low CAC score, statins provided no benefit whatsoever. If you had a normal person with a low CAC score, statins actually made the situation worse. The only situation where it was potentially beneficial was with a diabetic with high amounts of plaque already in there. And so when you say you get mad about misinformation about diabetes, in your interpretation, what is it? What is a misinformation? What do you think is wrong being told?
Okay, I'm a practical engineer. I learned science as it applies to being able to predict what's going to happen when you do X or when you do Y. As far as I'm concerned, everything else is voodoo. So when people go online and they talk about this causes that, in science, cause has a very specific meaning. These people are completely using these terms wrong, and they're talking to laymen about it who don't understand that they know absolutely nothing about what's going on when they say things like X causes Y. Okay, that's what I mean about misinformation. When I hear people talk about saturated fat causes insulin resistance, that's why you have to be a vegan if you're type 1. I come unglued. There are some advantages to plant-based diets for type 1s who refuse to eat animal-based products. It's better than the standard American diet. The Randall cycle, what you have going on with cross-inhibition of fats and carbohydrates in nutrition. If you go very low carb or very low fat, both of them are going to make managing type 1 diabetes easier. One's nutritionally deficient, but we won't talk about that.
Well, there's a vegan group that type 1 diabetics, there's a book called Mastering Diabetes, and the whole point is to dramatically lower your fat to such a low level where you're even counting the amount of fat that's in a banana. It's just like, so they have this 10 grams or less a day, and the thought is that they can dose less insulin per gram of carbohydrate, but I don't think it results in the level of overall control or the lower A1C that you do with
and it doesn't. You're talking about Cyrus and Bobby. Yeah,
right,
I'm familiar with
right.
them.
Yep, sure.
I'm sorry. Have you looked at the A1Cs they boast about?
It's probably six something, maybe. I don't know what it is. Maybe
6.1.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of work for a 6.1. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm unimpressed. Yes, if I have somebody who's a committed vegan, or if I have somebody whose religious convictions won't allow them to eat meat or something, I'll have them see if they can apply some of these things to try and make their life a little bit easier. I really don't think that's the way to go, but opinions vary. I'm not going to not help somebody just because they're doing something I don't believe in. Yeah. I'll try my hardest to figure out how to help them anyway. It's just sometimes, toolbox is empty, guys. I don't know what to do for you. So, the big problem I have with Cyrus and Bobby is that they are, and Paul Saladino, they are these people who constantly talk about what's in literature and what's known in science, and this has been proven, and that's been proven, and they're just blowing smoke. It's or something. They're blowing something. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there is a lot of yes, I agree that sometimes the literature does not match the clinical experience, and it's you kind of sometimes the patients are ignored in the process, and I'll just relate that in my own specialty orthopedics, we would have outcomes that were valuable to us. Hey, look at the we'd look at the we put in a knee replacement, we'd calculate the angles and make sure it was within a certain tolerance, and we would assume that was a good outcome, but the patients may still be miserable, and that was sort of minimized. It was kind of like, well, they're just cantankerous, they're just kind of difficult patients and stuff like that. Whereas, because look at this is a perfect knee replacement. There's nothing wrong with it, and that's in the literature in ways. And then when you go outside the orthopedic literature and you go to say the pain literature, and you ask people about how they did after knee replacement, the results are much worse. There's like 40% of them still have significant pain, whereas orthopedic literature says it's like 5%. So where is the disconnect there? And it's because they tend to disregard the actual users, the actual people that are being affected by this. And so,
too easy. It's too easy. Blame the patient. What we were talking about before, where I get angry about the misinformation. You ever heard the word iatrogenic? Yeah,
of course. Sure. Yeah. We caused it, right? Yeah.
Being a doctor. Yeah. It's basically caused by a doctor's treatment or advice.
Right.
All of the complications of type 1 diabetes are iatrogenic in origin.
Well, I could see some of them are. For sure. Yeah, for sure. I can see.
No, because they are all caused by high blood glucose. Why do you have to have high blood glucose if you're a type 1 diabetic? In this day and age, no one has to have high blood glucose if you're a type 1 diabetic.
That's true. That's true for sure. And if you
okay, there is one symptom. We are much more prone to hypoglycemia because we don't have the natural glucagon rescue response that normal people have. So we're much more susceptible to hypoglycemia. But that's it. If you want to talk about what are the complications of type 1 diabetes, that's it. Everything else is a complication of high blood glucose.
Yeah, I can see where you can make some of that argument. I think some people would argue that hypoglycemia is basically an insulin overdose. That's basically
yes,
right.
And I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
And so that's also
it's usually inadvertent.
Yeah, so that would also be more or less iatrogenic, I suppose.
Well, I'm not here to argue with you, Shawn, but when you have something that has got a 20% error rate built into it, cooked into it, and you're eating foods that make you take 2, 3, 4 times the amount of insulin you really have to take, that relative error of 20%
Right. Yeah.
applied to the much larger base value
Right.
means that what I eat, there's not much chance of me ever going hypoglycemia because I just don't take that much insulin.
Right. That's the old Bernstein law of small numbers type of situation when you're only giving small corrections. Do you ever have to give a corrective dose? Is there ever any time you have to give corrective doses? And how do you do it if you do?
Corrective doses of insulin.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a month. And it's usually because I've done something stupid.
Yeah.
I forgot something, or rather than sit down and really think about a bolus for a meal, I just kind of wing it. That usually happens when you're at a restaurant or something like that, or you get a mystery ingredient. As far as glucose goes, probably I only have to adjust up 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
But remember, we're talking about adjusting up a low. Low is your control point. That doesn't mean you're hypoglycemic. That just means that's as far as you want to go.
Yeah. And so when you adjust for a low and you give yourself a couple grams of carbohydrates, are you symptomatic in your testing, or is it just you test and you notice the low number?
No, I'm not symptomatic.
Okay.
I test. I have a tell. Different diabetics have different ways of telling whether you're going low. With me, the sides of my tongue start itching. Mm-hmm. It's the weirdest sensation, and my lips get numb. But that doesn't happen until I'm down around 60, 55, way down. I correct up at 70. And if I go down to 60, 65, it's no big deal. Yeah. It's in the physiological range for normal people anyway.
Right.
I have some cushion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a very interesting discussion, and I'm glad you found what works for you. We are unfortunately closing in on the hour here, and I just want to give you a chance if there's people that are interested in learning more about what you're doing, because you mentioned you do some kind of coaching type stuff. Where can people go to find you? Are you doing any social media stuff, or how does that work?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to set something up if I'm going to talk to people like you on the radio. Boy, I'm dating myself. I'm a hermit. I got involved with this because I became passionate. I don't want to talk to people, but I will spend my every waking day helping people do this because it's so important to me. Yeah. And by the way, thank you for being so patient with me. I know I kind of ambushed you with a couple of things, and you've just been a wonderful host, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, I don't feel ambushed at all. I think this is an interesting discussion, and I agree with the vast majority of what you're experiencing. I mean, it's hard to discount another human being's actual experience, and I mean it matches what I think is normally happening anyway. So, anyway, Well, thank you, and for the rest of you guys, thanks for being here and attending. We'll be back again tomorrow. Paul, best of luck to you, and keep up the good work. And I wish you and your wife many years of happiness and health. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.